everybody. Welcome to Trippy Times. My name is Joshua Casey. We have a very special guest joining us today, Kathleen Marden. I'm sure people know her as the grandniece of Betty and Barney Hill. Um, I don't think a lot of people know that she's also an experiencer herself, though. Looking in the chat, I see we got a couple people here. I know some other people going to be jumping in later. But thank you all for being here, and everybody's going to be joining us here shortly. I'm going to go ahead and bring in our guest. Uh, well, Kathleen.
Hello.
Hi there, Kathleen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. It's really such an honor, and I know Seb is going to be watching this later. Mutual friend, my MUFON investigator, Seb. She's the reason I was able to get connected with you. I know I've got a notepad over here. I need to find it here in a minute. I wrote down some things, but I know you have a book right now that did it release today or yesterday?
It was released yesterday, yes. Forbidden
Hmm.
Knowledge. Let's see, a personal journey from alien abduction to spiritual transformation. I changed the title so many times, I have to read it now. But yes, I just say Forbidden Knowledge because that's what it contains.
That's awesome. And I love the subtitle that you have with it too, the whole spiritual transformation, because that's something I went through. I didn't expect to go through it. And it kind of started out a little scary for me, to be honest, whenever I realized that this is all real. But for the people watching that may not know who you are, would you mind giving like a quick little condensed, I guess, summary of who you are and how you got into this field and everything?
Absolutely. Well, I am Kathleen Marden. I grew up in New Hampshire, and Betty and Barney Hill, the first couple ever to be scientifically investigated after they reported a close encounter with a UFO to the Air Force, were my aunt and uncle. My mother was Betty's sister. And I was 13 when it happened. And I saw the unfolding, the emotional impact this had on my aunt and uncle, the emotional impact it had when their story was released as the result of a violation of confidentiality, how it impacted the family and my life. I grew up, I was a very curious child. I was active politically with Betty and Barney. We were actually invited to Lyndon Johnson's inauguration and went together. I was in high school on the student council, just very active. I went to college, and by the time I was in college, their story was known. But it was the sort of thing that I didn't go around advertising. I talked to some of my more open-minded professors about that. From after I graduated from college, I was married, and we went on to Cincinnati, where my first husband was studying for his doctorate in the philosophy of psychiatry. And I had studied social work. I wanted to become a psychiatric social worker, but I ended up working as a teacher, did graduate work in education, and I taught school for many years. I was an education services coordinator. I had a strong background in the social sciences, and I've worked on 3 academic type studies. The PhD scientists who worked on these studies that I worked on were already retired. It's a kind of thing that is taboo. It's frowned upon in the universities. So I've worked on 3 major studies on about 5,000 experiencers. I was the Mutual UFO Network's director of experiencer research for 10 years and just left in 2021. I've written 6 books now, but some of them have been retitled as hardcover books. So if you look at what I've done on line, for example, on Amazon, you'll see many, many books credited to me. I worked
Yeah.
with nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman for nearly
Hmm.
14 years and wrote 3 books together. And, so I guess that sort of wraps up my history.
Hmm. Um, well, I guess that side of it. I was going to say, I know a lot of people know you. I mentioned earlier for being the grandniece of Betty and Barney Hill, but you're an
Denise,
experiencer yourself. Oh, you're their niece. I'm sorry, I keep saying
Denise,
grandniece.
yes.
I'm sorry. Um, but you're an experiencer yourself, and Cassie, you're right. That's very impressive resume. um, I was watching some of your other shows before you came on here and heard a little bit about some of your experiences. Um, First, I wanted to ask though, before we get into that, how exactly how you mentioned the huge impact, the emotional impact that it had on your life, and I'm sure it wasn't easy, but how did you handle that? I want to know, and yeah, like what did it lead to, or how did you make it turn into something positive? I guess.
Well, let me first of all say that my aunt, Betty, was
Mm-hmm.
working on what they called a psychophysics experiment with a team of scientists. We call it a CE5 today. And
Mm-hmm.
she was trying to call in craft to show itself close up or to land in certain areas. So one of those areas that she wanted the craft to land in was on my grandparents' farm. And I was 17 at the time. We'd already had a close encounter with a craft a couple of months before that. Many, many craft were seen in Kingston, New Hampshire, where I grew up, and in southern New Hampshire as well in that time frame. And there was a real flap going on. But this craft came in, landed on the grandparents' farm. I guess there was evidence on the ground and in the trees. It was observed by 2 individuals as it was landing, coming in for a landing, and that is what I believe I remembered when I was on craft. And
Um,
17 years old, and my mother was there too. I know that. I don't know if my grandmother was there or not. I grew up across the street from my grandparents' farm, and it haunted me. It haunted me because I knew I was in a different environment. I knew that there were some kind of people around, and I thought they were medical personnel. Something told
um,
me that. Uh, the way my 17-year-old mind put it together was that I must have needed some kind of surgery, and my mother didn't want to traumatize me by having this surgery, so she arranged to have it done in the middle of the night. And
wow.
I know that's ridiculous, but that's the way I tried to rationalize this. And finally, uh, I ended up having a very powerful abreaction where I realized, where I saw what their faces were, and I knew these were not human doctors. These doctors were
Wow.
extraterrestrial, what I believe is extraterrestrial. Um, it happened periodically throughout my life, and I was extraordinarily fearful in the beginning. But finally, I arrived at a point where I said, I cannot let this have a negative impact on me. I cannot live in fear. Either I can live my life as a victim or I can become a survivor. And it's always best to be a survivor. So I said, I have to devise a plan. And I had talked to many, many experiencers for the past 31 years. I've been active in this field. First with Betty and Barney, I've known loads and loads of experiencers. And so started the research, and finally I devised a plan, knowing what I needed to do. And that was, so many people came to me saying that they were having highly negative experiences. And I thought to myself, what can we do? Why are these experiences negative? It's because those particular entities who are taking these particular people, not the ones who took me, I was only frightened, but these entities were feeding off their fear. They they wanted that. They wanted the fear. They wanted the hatred. That's what they were thriving on. And I kept telling people, send love in their direction. Well, that's hard to do when you're terrified. So I had to devise a plan on how you could pull this deception seriously. And so I thought about hypnosis and self-hypnosis and being able to give yourself a key word. And I trained myself to do that. And when these entities came into my environment, which were they were fine. It was my fear that colored my perception of them. But I simply expressed love, projected love from my mind toward them. And when I did that, I received a very positive response, and I started to receive information from them as well.
Wow.
So it made all the difference in my life. And I think it's made a difference in the lives of those who are having negative interactions as well, because if they do this, then they can train themselves. It's really mind over matter. Then the people who are not getting these non-humans who are not getting this food that they're looking for, this fear, this hatred, they're going to go away. They're going to look elsewhere.
Wow, that's awesome, and I'm so glad that you got on that subject because that was one of the things that I was wanting to talk to you about. I'm very grateful that my experiences have been mostly positive. I've had one of those shadow being encounters that kind of scared me, to be honest. But for me, just whenever I realized that this was all real, and it started out when it was undeniable, just seeing these orbs. I think I sent you some of the videos of me at Chris Bledsoe's house. And I
Yes.
know I mentioned to you beforehand, I've known Chris for like 15 years, and I went to school with his kids. It wasn't until a little over a year ago that I started having my experiences, and I reached back out to Chris, and I got close with his father, and that's why I'm very grateful for. Chris, he's had very positive experiences that kind of
Yes.
more spiritual, I guess, and the way that he looks at it and everything. I think everything is spiritual, but really I started thinking I was going crazy for a little bit. I've told a couple people this. I started seeing these orbs and stuff, and I didn't know, like, am I making this up in my head? Am I seeing this stuff and it's not really there? Because early on it was just me seeing them. Afterwards, I started seeing them with other people. I called Chris and he said, Josh, come over to my house and you can experience it with me. And I had this major experience with him where I was able to record like 15 of them. And hearing his story and how he was healed, he had Crohn's disease. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but he was healed
Yes,
from
I
his
know
Crohn's disease.
Chris.
And
I've known him for
that's
a
it.
long time. I
Oh wow,
interviewed
that's
him
awesome.
not long after he had his experience on the Cape Fear River.
Yeah, that's where I had my very first sighting actually, which was about 5 years ago. And it's so bizarre. I had it with my best friend who I had my near death experience with, and it's like I kept it in denial for like 5 years. It was a simple little sighting. We were fishing, and it was an orb in the sky. I told him I thought it was a planet at first, and after 30 minutes, if that stands still, it just curves off like a backward C, but it's gone like in the blink of an eye. And
Mhm.
we talked about that night, and I never brought it up to him or anybody else for about 5 years until a little over a year ago when I started seeing him a lot more frequently. And just speaking to Chris and hearing how he had this good encounter and how he was healed, that helped me. Now I've never seen like actual extraterrestrial or anything like face to face, but I've seen these orbs a lot, and like I said, the shadow being, I still don't know what to think about that. That still kind of freaks me out, to be honest.
Yeah,
But
I
just
can tell
knowing
you
that there's good ones. I was going to ask you. I thought you had an encounter with a shadow being as well, didn't you?
every so often I will see shadow entities. They're just not fully materialized because these higher dimensional entities are they are higher dimensional. They vibrate at a higher frequency. So if they're in your presence, then you could see a shadow entity. And I think it's nothing to be fearful of. Sometimes I will see something walking in my house, a small individual, and that's just fine with me. And also, if I can't even see them at all, I can experience the feeling that they're close, because I feel a very strong electrical tingling sensation in my body when they're close. And it makes me feel ecstatic, in fact.
That's how I feel when I see the orbs outside. At least I get a euphoria from it as well. I
Yes.
love it now. I was going to I think it's really important people hear what you were saying earlier. I know some people jumped in that weren't in here a minute ago. When you were talking about like the negative versus the positive ones and how some of them are kind of parasitic and kind of just feed off of your low vibrational frequency. So and I had theorized about this myself before I started talking to other people. What you're saying is kind of just keep your, I guess if you have a low vibrational frequency, it kind of makes you more vulnerable to these negative entities, whether extra dimensional or extraterrestrial, right? And if you have a higher vibrational frequency, it kind of repels them and maybe helps you, I guess, attract or be um more prone to having positive experiences. Is that what you're basically saying with that?
Yes. And let me explain that a little bit more, because
Okay.
these lower vibrational interdimensionals uh, have a sneaky way of getting into attached to people. And so they will orchestrate something where you will feel horrified. If you are terribly frightened or horrified, it's easy for them to come in to your auric field and attach to you. And if they do, you will know immediately, because you'll feel like suddenly you're not yourself. There's a dark cloud hanging over you. If you let this continue, it will interfere with your sleep patterns. Your body will begin to ache, to hurt. You will feel unwell. Eventually, as it feeds off all of those negative things that it loves, then you will become sicker and sicker, and it will start to materialize in front of you. It will encourage you to commit suicide. It will do things like that. And
Wow.
so I I know that the way to help people to do this, and I did research on this for so many years, is to raise your vibrational level. In fact, you can go to my website. It's Kathleen, Kathleen dash Marden, MARDEN.com. And I have recently posted a paper there. It's under my essays on contact. And there are two essays actually on how to deal with negative interdimensionals. But I believe the last one is my newest, and it tells you how to raise your vibrational frequency, what you need to do to deal with these entities, just to get rid of them, because you're not feeding them what they want. And so it's really important, I say, to throw love in their direction.
Mhm. That's awesome. And by the way, I'm going to be updating the description. I'll post some of your links and everything down there. Um, so is there any like quick, I guess, points of advice like meditation and things like that? I guess things you might
You have
recommend people to do.
you have to protect yourself. First of all, for those who are listening, I'd like to say there are some very good guided meditations with higher vibrational music on YouTube. So just go to a guided meditation if you're not accustomed to meditating. I've also put another meditation on my website that you can use. And in addition to that, you need to protect yourself, because if you go into a meditation without protecting yourself, you're opening yourself up to these negative entities. So in that meditation that I have online, and you have to read it, I haven't recorded it, you have to imagine a river, a spiraling river of white light coming from the divine. And if you don't believe in God, heck, it's, the source, it's the highest consciousness. I don't want to say that you have to have a particular religious belief for this to work. You think of that entering through your crown chakra. I find working with the chakras is very important because you can cleanse your chakras too as you're moving through. The third eye chakra, and expanding with this divine energy out through all of the cells in the body. You go through all of the chakras, the head, the third eye, the throat, the heart, the solar plexus, the sacral, and the root chakra, which is actually the number one chakra. And as you're moving along, let any blockages be carried down as you go, be carried down to your feet, where you can just release them into the earth as excess energy that anyone can use. So you're not putting this darkness into the soil. And I say every morning it's important to root yourself, spiral down into Mother Earth and bring sacred energy from Mother Earth up to you. It's important to walk around outdoors barefoot if you can. Also, pull that sacred energy back up as you move up to your crown chakra again. And you can do it before you go to bed at night as well. And it will protect you. And there are other things. There's certain music that is very hateful, video games that are very hateful, that will prepare you to have a negative entity attachment. Things that involve violence and just horror attract the negative. So you want to get away from that and send that love out into your environment, to the flora and the fauna too. You'll see that it makes a difference.
All right, like law of attraction, like how they say your environment, your life is a reflection of who you are on the inside.
Yes.
And I love what you said about being out in nature, because I have a couple other they're host on a couple other podcasts. They come on here like on the shifting paradigm segment I mentioned to you earlier, and we've been talking about that a lot. And just being out in nature and getting energy from something else that's not toxic. And I was telling somebody just the last show, I think that I feel like a lot of people want to get addicted to something, whether it's something like a substance or alcohol or a person. It could even be, any kind of form of escapism, whether they're talking about, like movies or a person, or just anything, or just eating, or, way of thinking. Anything can be an addiction. I feel like somebody feels depleted on the inside, so they feel like they need to get some kind of energy from something else. So they go to something that they don't realize is really just making it worse. But doing things like what you're saying, especially being out in nature, because that's natural, I feel like that is a good way to really raise your vibrational frequency, like you were saying. I'm kind of new into all this, but I love that a lot of things that you're saying they line up exactly with how I've been feeling about a lot of this.
There have been studies done in India about the impact of alcohol on your vibrational frequency. And these are scientific studies. And they gave people one alcoholic beverage, 2, 3. What they discovered is if you have more than 2 in a single day, it lowers your vibrational frequency. So if you're treating your fear, your anxiety with alcohol, and you're overdoing it like that, then it is only going to cause that negative energy to grow. The same thing is true of opioids. And if people have clinical depression, the negative entities attach to these people as well and make the situation worse. So if you feel that you're clinically depressed, I think it's really important to visit a doctor and get a prescription to help. You don't have to live an unhappy life. You don't have to feel this anxiety, this trauma. There are ways to overcome it. And it's important to be a survivor, not a victim.
That's awesome. I'm gonna grab my notepad real quick. It's right here. Sorry. Um, yeah, I love that so much. And I mentioned to you earlier, I think before we got on, that I had a near-death experience 11
Yes.
years ago now, and I call like my 5 years of darkness. I guess I went through a lot of struggles afterwards. I went through depression, and I broke like the whole right side of my body. I was in a wheelchair for half a year. I was in a coma for a week. I was pinned in a vehicle for an hour and a half after being hit by a truck driver, and it just it took a toll on me. And I mean, now I see it as a good thing now, because I realize I wouldn't be where I am right now or thinking the way that I am if I wouldn't have gone through that. But at the same time, I feel like we all have free will, and certain things might be fate. Like there was no way I could have avoided that car accident, but the way I responded to it, that was completely up to me. And I had to just kind of change the way that I looked at things. Like I spent years thinking like, why me? Like you said, playing the victim, and thinking that like my life was taken away by this guy. But then I turned it around and kind of just started looking at it from I just tried to take the positive out of it, I guess, the best way I can say that. And it changed everything about me, really.
It's
it,
very
it,
important, extremely important.
I wanted to so I had some things written down right here. Yeah, okay, here we go. Um, okay, I guess since we're on this subject right now, I'm probably gonna be jumping around here a little bit. I remember listening to one of your videos, and it might have been on Portal to Ascension. I'm not sure which one it was, and I heard you say something that I don't think I heard you say anywhere else. And you mentioned I cannot remember his name. The council. There's a
Yes.
guy that you met. Would you mind? Are you okay sharing a little bit about that? I thought that was just
Yes, I
really
can share
profound.
a little. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm talking over you. I'd be happy to share a little bit. It
Okay.
is all in my new book,
Okay.
Forbidden Knowledge, the entire background and history of this. But for many, many years, let me say that I was a nuts and bolts researcher, investigator. Uh, if you told me that there were orbs, I would deny it, even though I'd seen them with my own eyes. I was rejecting that right brain side of me. And as a social scientist, being as scientific as I possibly could, that's what you're expected to do. And so eventually, I was asked to take part in an experiment. I was speaking at MUFON's International Symposium in Orlando in 2016. And I had a couple of friends who were there, Denise Stoner, who works very closely with me. She and I are co-authors of the Alien Abduction Files, and also Dr. Melanie Barton Bragg, who is a psychotherapist, a minister, and an experiencer. And they both met this man. His name is Kevin Briggs. And they invited me to meet him after the symposium. I was extraordinarily busy at the symposium. I couldn't meet anyone unless they came to my table to buy a book. And so I said, okay, I'll meet this man who claims that he talks to aliens. I thought, well, what are the possibilities? He's delusional, or he is a hoaxer and he's trying to put one over on us, or he is actually a secret debunker who wants to do this in order to destroy my good reputation. And so I treaded very, very lightly in all of this. We had a lunch together a couple of times, and then I invited everyone back to my home for more discussion. And when we were talking, we were asking Kevin questions, and suddenly Denise Stoner said, "Do you know what he's doing?" I didn't know what he was doing. And Melanie spoke up, Dr. Barton Bragg, and she said, "I think he's channeling." And I was kind of scoffing at that. And so I think he was channeling from probably the first time in his life. And we stayed in touch. And then he ended up inviting us to take part in an experiment where we would meet at his home one Saturday every month. And we were invited to ask questions. So I thought, okay, I'll do this secret experiment. I'll never let anyone know about this because I'll ruin my good reputation if I do. And so we went. Melanie, who lives way up in the northern part of Florida, would drive down to my home in Central Florida. She'd spend the weekend. Denise is in Central Florida too, but she would spend the weekend with us as well. And we got to know each other a lot better. And we were able to conduct this experiment. We were able to take our equipment as investigators to attempt to measure changes in the environment. And eventually, the council said that they would like to meet us. They would like to show us evidence that they're real. And we thought, well, that's good because we're into evidence. We're not true believers. We're not going to believe anything that might not be true. So they came to us and one Saturday, and we couldn't see them, but we could feel their presence. We could also record using a laser thermometer an increase in the temperature in that part of the room
Wow.
where they were standing. There was a 5-degree increase in the temperature for the 7 members, 5th and 6th dimensional entities on the council. And then there was a 9th dimensional, and the temperature increased more than 8 degrees in his presence. And so this was interesting. We had this strong electrical tingling through our bodies, through the crowns of our heads. We were, it put you almost in a type of trance itself as this is occurring. And we started to ask questions. Initially, Kevin Briggs grew tired very quickly, and he was drenched with perspiration. His clothing was soaked when he finished after a short period, maybe a half hour. But as time went on, he became more comfortable with this and was able to do it for longer periods of time. We started out by asking general questions like, why are you here? What do you want with us? And the answers that we were given were, we've been here for a very long time. We come back from time to time to assist in your development. You've reached a point in your development where you are a danger to yourselves and your planet. And you have destroyed your planet before, and we're not going to let it happen this time. So that's some of the information. I have answers to 120 questions in my new book, Forbidden Knowledge, that you can buy at Amazon.com. And it's available in hardcover, as a paperback, and also via ebook right now. Eventually it will be an audiobook, but that's down the road. So it was important to learn that. And then we went on and they said, we want to meet each of you and we want to show you evidence. We want to show you our craft. And so Melanie, Dr. Melanie, was the first one to experience this. And she did see a craft, and she did have telepathic communication with one of these entities.
Wow.
And then it was Denise's turn, and she did see a craft, but it was at a distance. Denise lives in a more highly populated area, a suburb of Orlando, but highly populated. And so, but she did see the craft zigzagging in the sky, moving erratically. And she didn't at that point have communication with one of these non-humans, but eventually she did. And then I was next in line, and they went out in the middle of the night, and I'm not a late night person. So I said, well, I want you to see the craft early in the morning. How about 5 o'clock in the morning? So Zark, a gray entity, I was comfortable with that because I'd interacted with these grays for most of my life. Said that I had a keen scientific mind, and that's why he wanted to interact with me. So we arranged for him to show me a craft at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was seated on my deck overlooking the lake. I saw lights blinking on in houses, and suddenly I felt his presence of that very strong electrical tingling. There was some kind of communication. I don't know what it was, because sometimes when it's that strong, it takes my memory away. But as I observed the lake, I was expecting to see a craft, and I saw the water suddenly, an area of maybe 40 feet in diameter, where the water was just roiling in waves around and around in a circle.
Wow.
And I thought, no, is this a craft that's coming up out of the water? And then I didn't see one come up. And then I thought, oh, maybe the craft is hovering over the water, and its movement is causing this effect on the water, but it's cloaked. Or maybe it itself is interdimensional and it's not fully materialized. And so I thought, well, maybe that's it, but we'll see. I'm still not satisfied. I wanted to see a craft close up. I had very high expectations. And of course, this was at the beginning of this process that began in 2016. We met once a month for a period of 2 years, and we continue to meet 2 to 3 times a year now.
Wow.
And Zark ended up saying that, no, he thought it was his energy that was causing that. They didn't show a craft because of the military activity in the area, and because there were a lot of people around. So
Wow.
why I saw what I saw, but not what I wanted to see. I felt what I felt as well. I sensed it as part of my body. I didn't have evidence. I had a camera with me. I was going to take photographs of this lighted craft, and I didn't get any photographs of it. So that was a disappointment to me, but still, it was a certain level of evidence. And a lot of this ended up being a learning experience for all of us, because they taught us about consciousness and how to elevate our frequency. And once our vibrational frequency is high enough, then we will be able to see them and their craft. But it requires the elevation of our consciousness and our spirituality. So that's essentially what it's all about. But there are 120 questions and their answers, which are very specific in my new book, Forbidden Knowledge.
I'm definitely going to have to check that out. And Nightmare, thank you for posting a link to her book up there. Yeah, that is incredible. Now, and the consciousness thing that leads into like the next thing I was going to ask you about. But I want to ask you real quick. This council, and I listened to some of Is it Jason Briggs? Was that his name? Briggs,
Kevin Briggs.
Kevin.
Yes,
I
Kevin.
listened to I listened to one of his talks just here recently. I think it was Higher Journeys. I think you've been on there as well. With Alexis. Um,
Oh,
I
Alexis.
just found that channel. Yes, her. Yeah, I just found that channel here recently. I like it. Very deep talks she has there. I loved your show on there as well. But I heard him say on there that there was more than one of these councils that he found out, I guess, later on that council he's dealing with is not the only council, I guess. Um, I wanted to ask, I'm not sure if you were aware of that or not, but
Yes, I am.
so Papa, you said yeah, I was gonna say you still meet with them. And you said every year you meet with them?
We still meet with the council 2 to 3 times a year.
Wow. How many members
Just
are on this?
the three of us. We had a much larger team, but that ended up dissolving because we had negative energy that was coming in and
Oh
causing
wow.
problems. But we do meet 2 to 3 times a year now. But just those of us who have been able, we're all experiencers, those of us who have been able to elevate our vibrational frequency and have been successful in connecting and communicating.
That's incredible. How many the council, how many is on it? Is it 9 or 8? I'm trying to remember.
Well, it's called the Council of Eight, but let me explain.
Okay.
There are fifth and sixth dimensionals. If you purchase my book, you will see my artwork of what all of the council looks like. So at the head of the council, lead council, is a ninth dimensional entity. His name is Ra, and I immediately thought of the Egyptian sun god Ra. He
Yeah.
explained that he did live here in physical form in Egyptian times, but that he's not the sun god.
Oh wow.
And he is lead counsel overseeing this council of eight who are part of the Galactic Federation, who are in charge of this quadrant of our galaxy. They're sort of, I don't know if you call it the police force or the benevolent force, whatever it is. They want to have things right for us. Ra, the ninth person, would be Shiva. And so that brings to mind the Indian man, Shiva, Shiva. Shiva is Sheeva. She's female. She's a healer. I think of her as an angelic figure. In fact, I've seen her
Really?
just
Oh,
sort of as a shadow entity with Denise and Melanie as well. And Shiva, we saw what appeared to be feathers and wings. So that reminded us of an angel. But she is a
wow.
ninth dimensional healer. They're not God. They say that there is one source consciousness, God, who is the creator, but that Shiva and Ra are underneath. They're elevated in frequency. They no longer reincarnate to the physical, but they're there. Their consciousness is there. The others who are members of the Council of Eight, the other seven, are Ort and D. I don't know if you heard Kevin Briggs talk about Ort and D, but
That's the first ones he saw, right?
yes, when he was an 8-year-old boy growing up in England, he was in the bathtub and they materialized in front of him and spoke to him, terrified him. He couldn't get out of the tub because he was so frightened. And his mother finally came and checked on him. And, so they dematerialized when she came in. But then a week later, Ort came back and talked to Kevin, or I think it was a year later, sorry. He came back as an orb and he talked to Kevin. He stayed with Kevin for a week and he taught him how to astral travel and began to teach him about consciousness. And so Kevin has been doing this for a very long time, from the time he was a 9-year-old boy. And he had a missing time event when he was a 15-year-old paper boy in England as well. He grew up and he became a police officer. He got married, worked at the university in Manchester. He met his wife there. She was a professor of sorts who worked in the psychology department. She was a researcher. She sort of ran things in the psychology department there. She taught an undergraduate course. And they moved to the United States and became citizens of, more than 20 years ago now. In fact, they live in the town that I live in, which is just amazing.
Oh, really?
I wonder if that is more than just coincidence.
Yeah, really synchronistic.
Yes, very much so. But so there's Orton D. They're very tall. They look human, only much larger than us. You'll see there. I've seen most of those members in my mind's eye, or I've seen Kevin's drawings of them, or his wife's drawings, sketches. Then we have Orla and Arna. We have a tall white, and we have a blue avian. Then we have Chica and Targ. Chica is a mantis entity. Looks like a praying mantis, but I like him. I've met him before in my mind's eye. He has a big smile on his face. You say a mantis with a big smile? Yes, he was a big smile, almost like a cartoon smile on half of his face as he looked at me. And a Targ is a tall gray. And then there's Zark, whom I met and communicated with many times. In fact, he channeled through me one time when I had the courage to do that. And he is a gray, about 5 feet tall, a scientist. So
did I hear you? I'm sorry. Did I hear
ahead.
you say on the other video that one of the council was Anunnaki? Or am I mistaken on that?
Yes. In fact, Ra says that he is Anunnaki, an Anunnaki watcher. So he goes back a long, long time on this earth. And
That's incredible.
yes.
So I wanted to okay.
There are no reptilians on the council.
See, I had thought for a long time that all the Anunnaki were more malevolent, but I've looked into it here more recently, and I don't know. I guess that not so much all of them are. Could you clarify on that a little bit, or do you know? Are
I
there
can tell you what
good and bad ones?
I can tell you what I know.
Okay.
The Anunnaki say that they have a bad reputation because what they did here was misinterpreted. That they say that they were not enslaving humanity to mine for them, that they were here assisting humanity that long ago to become more civilized, to give us information, religion, based on their knowledge of this, and that we misinterpreted that. They didn't intend for us to have all these religious wars and a lifetime of one skirmish or one country or group killing another over and over again. That's been part of our behavior that concerns them all through this. And they say that they've altered our DNA at least once. And the experiments that they're doing now is attempting to alter our DNA. It's being carried out by the Greys, who are incredible geneticists. But what they're attempting to do is create a more survivable human, to kind of genetically reduce some of those very strong emotions, especially those negative emotions that humans have, while at the same time attempting to raise our vibration and spirituality, because that will make us happier as a species.
Yeah,
And
I've
life
been
will
saying
be easier for all of us.
that's that's a lot to think about. I've been saying here for a little while, and I gotta say, if you would have met me like a little over a year ago, I just turned to a whole different person. Just, oh, I mean, I've been playing so much catch up, but also like this, I guess awakening. I think it sounds a little kind of cliche. I don't know if you want to call it enlightenment or ascension or that's pretty much what the whole other segment is that I have on here. The shifting paradigms is we just talk about that and what's going on in the world and where it could be leading or what it means. I also want to say, when I first got into this, like you said, I was very nuts and bolts in it. When I first, realized it was real, until I started seeing some of these orbs in these balls of light, like literally materialize from thin air, and then that's when I'm just, it made me question everything, and that's what ended up leading me over there to get back in contact with Chris Bledsoe. But I've been saying that I feel like religions, they turn more into like a government and kind of just divided people. And I don't know where I came up with this, but I put it on my refrigerator actually. The religions divided and frightened, while spirituality unites and enlightens. And I feel like just people kind of turn it into like a government, to keep people in fear and control them. And like what you said, it was never really meant to be that, for somebody to be on one part of the world and say you have to live this way and every other way is the wrong way. Um, I have a belief that we're all like a piece of the universe, if that makes sense, like a fractal of the universe. And if the universe is God or source, we would be a piece of that, creating it alongside it, I guess. And I don't know where all these thoughts started coming from, but it just makes me feel like if we could all just, be more accepting to the fact that we're all a unique, piece of the universe and we're all creators, instead of, being so divided and telling everybody that we have to live this way, the world would, go to a much brighter future, like you were saying.
Yes, and those people who initially wanted to control others, those who wanted the wealth, who wanted the power, who wanted the control, used that religion and perverted it so that they could say, this is God's will. If you're not following God's will, you're going to hell. You're going to be punished for not doing as I say. They were not representing God. They were representing their own personal lust for power and for
Yeah.
control. And
Yeah, and that's no offense to anybody's religion. 'Cause I respect
no,
everybody's
no, not at
religions, to
all.
be honest. And I feel like there's these what I can't remember, people call them like enlightened teachers or just these religious figures. I'm not putting any disrespect towards any of those people. I feel like what you said, the people that wanted the power and control, they're the ones that, like you said, they perverted it and they wanted to make it get benefit out of somebody else, trying to make the world better, pretty much.
Yes,
Um,
and I like to think of God as a loving God,
yeah,
not the kind of God that these power mongers way back in history uh, thought of it and conditioned people to believe.
yes, exactly. I want to get back to this consciousness thing because that's something I really wanted to speak to you about. But before I get to that, because I meant to ask you this at the very beginning. Other members of your family, some of them are experiencers as well, aren't they?
My mother, and that's as far as I'll go. I won't talk about
Okay.
anyone in the family who is still
Okay.
alive because I don't want them to be ridiculed, to lose their income, to lose their businesses, anything else. So my mother had missing time experiences. One time she went out grocery shopping with for groceries on a Friday night. She did this every Friday night. She left the house at a certain hour. She returned at a certain hour. This particular night, she did not return. And we became very worried about her. Finally, she did show up hours later than she should have. not realizing that she was late, and all the frozen food that she brought home had thawed. The ice cream was soup. It was ruined. And my father was extraordinarily angry, thinking that she had, been off with another man or something. But no, I know my mother would never do that. I think she was taken. I'm
Wow.
quite certain she was taken.
Wow. That's incredible. I had Terry Lovelace on here a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me about his riding his bike and having missing time, his motorcycle. Um, Kind of made me think about that when he said that. I don't know if you've heard him say it. I'm sure you know Terry.
Yes, I
But
know him.
have you heard that story where he talks about just he never got off of his bike, but he said he was riding his motorcycle and it's like the road went from gravel to dirt, I believe is what he said, and he had some missing time. And it wasn't until he got home and he realized what was playing on the TV that he actually had a gap in his time, and that God, that kind of blew my mind. The fact that he was still on his motorcycle the entire time. I want to ask you this real quick. As far as the missing time, because I really feel like most, if not all, of these life forms or entities or whatever you want to call them, they operate in some kind of way outside of time, not by our laws of physics, obviously. But if they have the ability to do certain things like this, why do you think they even allow us to know that we're missing time? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, if they can do this, why couldn't they just like take somebody out and put them right back in where they were at? Or do you think that they do that, or do you think that there's a reason, like maybe they want us to have a little bit of maybe I guess a little bit something to question? I guess, am I making sense of what I'm asking?
You are, and it's a very good question. And there's more than one answer to that. Um,
Okay.
First, time is different for them. Time is not linear the way it is for us. So when they take us to this different dimension, we experience time differently. And when we're returned, sometimes it's completely seamless, as it was for my mother. She wouldn't have known, unless she found the groceries thawed the way she did. And my father was waiting for her and she was hours late. But sometimes it appears that I don't know if they're making mistakes or if they're allowing us to remember part of it, because most of us have some conscious recall of being taken to craft. It's not as if it's completely wiped from our minds. And when this occurs, like, for example, Betty and Barney Hill, my aunt and uncle, they were aware that they were missing about 2 hours time. There was physical evidence. And there were the memories of the craft hovering only 100 feet from my uncle, where he saw these non-humans and was fearful that he was going to be captured. That's the title of my book on them, Captured: The Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience. And so it seems that they wanted to leave some evidence with Betty and Barney. And, although Barney was highly traumatized by this, when Dr. Benjamin Simon, who worked with Barney to help him through this post-traumatic stress disorder that he was experiencing, asked him the question under hypnosis, were you kidnapped? Barney said, no, I don't think of it as kidnapping, because when I think of kidnapping, I think that someone has been harmed, and I wasn't harmed. So he came to that realization through hypnosis. And Betty also had some kind of a vague memory of wanting them to come back. And as she was being escorted off the craft, she said to that leader, do you think you could come back and I could introduce you to people who know a lot more about this? And he said, well, it's not my decision to make. Maybe I'll be able to come back. And Betty said, well, if you can, how would you find me? Out of all the people on this planet, how would you find me? And he said to her, this is all telepathic, we can always find those that we're looking for. And so
Wow.
that made me wonder if maybe this was not Betty's first rodeo, that,
I was about to say the same thing.
from the family farm when she was a little girl growing up.
Wow.
And my mother
That's
too.
yeah, I was about to say the same thing, and you mentioned your mother. So it seems like, because I've heard a lot of people say this is something that a lot of times runs in the family. Um, wow, that's and I kind of skipped over a lot of the stuff. I feel like most people know the story of your aunt and uncle, Betty and Barney. I skipped over a lot of that, but there is a couple of things that I want to go back on now that you got me thinking about it. So Betty, when she was being escorted off the craft, didn't she see was it a map, like a star map, or some constellations or something like that? I'm trying to remember exactly what it was.
After her physical examination was over, she looked around the craft in the room that she was in, and her escort was there with her. She called him the leader. And she saw something that looked like a tablet today. And the other thing that she did was she went up to this leader and she said to him, I know you're not from around here. Where's your home port? And he produced a three-dimensional star map. It was longer than it was wide. And she looked up into it. And he said to her, do you know where you are on this map? She saw several stars on this map. There were two in the foreground that were the size of quarters, connected by 5 or 6 lines, solid lines. There were other stars, a dozen others, and that were connected by lines. And then there were others that were not connected by lines. Some of them had solid lines. Some of them had dotted lines. And when she said to him, to his question, do you know where you are on this map? She said, no, I don't. Don't know very much about the universe. So she wasn't even talking about the galaxy. She had never studied astronomy. And so he just put the star map away. And under hypnosis with Dr. Benjamin Simon, a renowned neuropsychiatrist, he said to Betty, well, do you think you could go home and draw the star map and then bring it back to my office? And she said, well, maybe I can. And he said, well, do it if it doesn't cause too much emotional upset for you, and if you can remember it accurately. So over the next couple of weeks, she sketched it on paper using pencils and took it back to him. And this became a very important piece of evidence in their case. The reason for that is their story, there was a violation of confidentiality in 1965 that took their story to the public. They were never, ever going to make that public because they were important figures politically in the state of New Hampshire. But it was brought to the public. John Fuller, a famous author, wrote the first book on it, traveled around the world. It was the New York Times bestseller. And that star map was in that book. And there was a brilliant woman from Ohio, Marjorie Fish was her name. She was an amateur astronomer. She was a member of Mensa, meaning that she had an IQ, I think it was above 140. And she began her work to try to identify the stars on the map. She met with Betty. I actually met her at Betty's home and knew her a little bit. And because there were no computers in those days, back in the early 60s, the mid to late 60s, actually, the book was published in 1966. She began her work in 67, I believe it was. And she went to the university. She sat down with the astronomical catalog. She couldn't take them home with her, couldn't check them out. she wrote down all of the characteristics of the stars in our local galactic neighborhood out 55 light years from the sun in all directions, trying to find a match for Betty's map. Initially, she thought she'd find several. In the end, she found only one, but it took several years. We had to develop technologically to get accurate distance data for Marjorie to actually find a match for Betty's map. And then nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman was called in. This is why I worked with Stanton for 14 years, because we became friends and we wrote 3 books together. But nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman was called in to find scientists to vet Marjorie's work. First, he met Marjorie. He had to evaluate her himself. And he said to me, Kathy, Marjorie Fish was much better at talking to scientists than to the general public. And he took her to Dr. Alan Hynek, who was the astronomical consultant for the Air Force's Project Blue Book for many years, and then ran the Dearborn Observatory, head of the department at the Northwestern University. He was at Harvard for a while too, before that. And so he vetted Marjorie's work and said it was reasonably accurate, an accurate match for what Betty had drawn. And other astronomers did as well, and they said that it was accurate. And there were, not only was it accurate, but the stars on that map in that volume of space, we know now, have exoplanets. There's a very high percentage with exoplanets.
I was just about to say that.
Yes, and also all of the stars on Betty's map are sun-like stars, although only 5% of the stars in our local galactic neighborhood, out 55 light years in all directions from our sun, are sun-like stars. And all of the sun-like stars in that volume of space are on Betty's map. Not only that, if we lived on a planet that was revolving around Zeta Reticuli, we wanted to explore the local galactic neighborhood, those stars on Betty's map would have been a reasonable exploration route. It would be where we would go.
Wow, that's incredible. That's like smoking gun evidence to me, especially the fact that she was able to, draw this back out after her regression, years or however long before we even had the technology to know that it was accurate. That's just incredible to me. People ask, where's the smoking gun? And I don't know. To me, whenever I got into this and I started digging into things, and kind of why it says surreal that you're on here right now, because your aunt and uncle are one of the first people I remember looking into. And that's actually, I mentioned I kind of got into a freak out phase early on. That kind of scared me at first. I remember listening to that tape of them whenever, especially Barney's reaction, and just kind of put me into a fear state at first. But that was before, I got back in touch with Chris Bledsoe, and I started looking into it. And also the Zimbabwe case. That's another thing that made me really kind of think, if they're all bad, why would they be telling these kids at the Zimbabwe aerial school, what we're doing to our planet, which links up with what you said about the Council of Eight earlier. And I want to ask you real quick. That's all such incredible stuff that you're just saying. By the way, I got so many thoughts in my mind. But as far as the benevolent versus the malevolent ones, do you? I mean, I like to think, I hope that there's a lot more benevolent ones. But would you happen to have any knowledge of which one outnumbers the other one, or how that works? I guess.
In the Mutual UFO Network's experiencer research team's study with Dr. Don C. Dundary, who is a psychologist, research psychologist, spent his entire career at McGill University doing social research. So, and he took part in that study that I put together and did with MUFON. And we had another PhD scientist as well on that. And what we discovered through our questions was that less than 10% say that these entities are evil, that sort of thing.
That's good.
That means 90% are either neither benevolent or malevolent, they're just businesslike. And then on the other hand, we have a percentage who are just simply highly spiritual and benevolent, just like Chris Bledsoe's contacts and my contacts now, after I have known the Council of Eight. And, and those benevolent entities keep the malevolent ones in check. And what we think of as malevolent is those draconian reptilians, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to keep them in check, definitely.
I think it's really important that people don't get too caught up in all the doom and gloom, because this is, it can be scary to some people, especially people who are very new into it.
Yes.
Just to know that there's more benevolent ones out there. And so another reason I was really glad to hear some of your stories I'd never heard before, like about the council and everything. And speaking of them, you mentioned humanity. I don't know if they were just talking about you and Briggs and the people that were with y'all, or did you mean humanity as a whole, raising their vibrational frequency and their consciousness and spirituality you said to be able to see them? Was that towards everybody, like the whole collective conscious, or just y'all? I was trying to clarify that.
The members, the three women involved in this, were able to raise our vibrational frequency. We can see shadow figures. We can sense their vibration. Sometimes I see almost a shimmering. I don't know if they're at the edge of the membrane between their dimension and ours. I've seen orbs. I've asked them, and they've shown me orbs.
Wow.
So yes,
So do you think this is an ability? I think I should have been a little bit more. I didn't word that quite right. I mean, I did want to know that about y'all specifically, but do you think everybody has the ability to maybe see or experience these things? I know
do.
I've been looking. You do. That's What are your thoughts on people who because I was asked this by Sev, a few other people, about the fact that I've had a near-death experience in my past, and just trauma, and they also asked me if I'm an artist and a musician and certain things like that. I started digging into it and learned a lot of experience. They've had trauma, or it runs in the family, or they're an artist or a musician, and the whole left brain right brain thing that you were speaking about earlier. So I guess is it left brain you're more logical? Is that which one it is? I'm trying, and then the right
Yes,
brain.
yes, and the
So
right brain is more inductive reasoning. The right brain is the side of the brain that you need to access in order to be able to raise your vibrational frequency, your spirituality. You need to protect yourself, just as I spoke about with negative entities. Protect yourself from them. But if you do these exercises yourself under protection every day, then you will eventually be able to reach a higher level of frequency. I know it worked. Because for me, it was difficult in the beginning because of my left brain. But the more I got over into the right brain, the more I was able to elevate my consciousness, to see more, to communicate more. And, I'm still learning. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it.
So it's kind of like neuroplasticity in a way, I guess. Do you think these beings that I kind of quit straight up just saying alien, because I really feel like it's so much more than that. The more I've been digging into this, I feel like it's just, I don't know. I feel like the gap between what we call extraterrestrial, and maybe even some things that are more paranormal, it's starting to close a little bit. I don't know if that's just me or what I've been looking into or the people I've been talking with, but I feel like it's not just one thing. I don't, I'm sure that there is things that are from other planets and even things that might just be nuts and bolts, but I feel like it's really something so big we probably can't even wrap our head around it if we tried to. But I was going to ask, like, as far as the interdimensional things, like what you're speaking of, do you think they're like these invisible spectrums of light that or energy that maybe are always around us that we have to be able to tap into that, or maybe shift that left brain to right brain to be able to experience it? If you get what I'm saying, I know I kind of bounced around a little bit there.
Well, you have to understand that as humans, we have a limited visual range. But if we can increase that vibrational frequency, just like the monks who practice yoga and meditation for much of the day are able to raise their frequency to actually float, to reach higher levels of vibration, then yes, I think that we all have the ability to do that. We only need to take the time to do that. And you have to sever your ties to the negative. And a lot of people are attracted to the negative. I personally wonder if these entities are extraterrestrials or if they are interdimensionals. And the reason I say that is that I acquired information about a government study that was done back in 1954 with extraterrestrials. And I've written about it in my new book, Forbidden Knowledge. But in that study, it was a matter of raising your vibration as well. And in that study, when there was a nuclear explosions, when, for example, in Japan, these entities told the government officials that nuclear bombs exploding caused a problem with the Earth's magnetic field, the magnetic fault lines, and it caused destruction to move out through the dimensions. And I know that way back in the 40s, when we were developing these nuclear weapons and testing them, there were UFOs around. And these scientists wondered if they were a byproduct of a nuclear explosion. So are they? Were these people coming through the dimensions to try to save themselves from us, as opposed to coming here from other planets? Are they part of this fabric that we're all made from? I don't know the answer to that question. And when I would ask Kevin Briggs, his Council of Eight, these questions in different ways over and over again, they would always say, I would say, are you extraterrestrial or are you interdimensionals? And they would say, extraterrestrial to you, but not to ourselves. Yes.
Right. Well, I mean, that's
It doesn't matter to me as long as they're giving a good message. If they're just interdimensionals, I don't care if they're extraterrestrials too. They're benevolent, they're kind, they're spiritual. They put us closer to God. That's
yes,
what's
and that's
important to me.
that's definitely the most important thing. And I've been speaking with some of my friends in this community about how I guess just the way that we're conditioned to live right now is just to believe that everything is completely material and that a lot of these things don't exist, even the more, I guess, paranormal or supernatural aspects of life. And like I said, when I first got into this, I was so nuts and bold. It was so hard for me to wrap my head around anything. Just, like it really took Skinwalker Ranch. When I started looking into that, that's whenever I started opening up my mind. Like, okay, there's more than just, UFOs and aliens. Like, there's other things going on here that it's like I stepped into a whole new reality, really. Um,
Mhm.
I want to ask, have you had any personal experiences that you would consider more on the lines of paranormal? I guess I know you mentioned the shadow being early, but is there anything else?
Orbs that I've
Um,
seen, um, that
so when you're talking about orbs, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over
inside the
you.
home,
Okay, okay,
not up in
I
the
was gonna
sky.
okay,
The kind of orbs that Chris Bledsoe sees when he's outdoors, he could see those inside as well. I know he could call them into the house if that's what he chose to do. Um, I suspect that they are just these interdimensional entities who are at that fabric in the space-time continuum between the dimensions, and we see them as orbs and they see us as orbs until they step into our environment or we step into theirs.
Oh
And
wow,
I know that sounds pretty deep, but way back in
I never thought about it like that.
way back in 2012, 2013, I started talking to physicists. One of them was Dr. Rudy Shield. He is an astrophysicist. He's recently retired from Harvard University. He worked at the Harvard Smithsonian Astrophysics Laboratory. Brilliant man. And also Claude Swanson, who is another PhD physicist extraordinary. I talked to them and I said, is it scientifically possible for human beings to be passed through a physical surface, such as walls, ceilings, windows, as what experiencers were reporting? And they said, yes, it absolutely is. They said, think of it this way. In theory, everything has a vibrational frequency. Well,
Hmm.
we know that too. This physicists have proved that. Um, so everything is vibrating. And you have to remember that the atom is 99.9% empty space. And they both told me that the only thing that it takes for matter to pass through matter is to align the frequency, the rate of its vibrating, and the phase so that they will interpenetrate. And they said, we have already done this in a laboratory on a tiny scale using neutrinos. We know that it's possible. These ETs, if you want to call them that, are just so far ahead of us that they have developed the technology. That's one way to look at it.
A
Are they?
change of frequencies, all right? Kind of
Yeah.
like the sound cymatics. I can never say that right. Um, with the sound experience with the sand, and like what you're saying with everything having a frequency. Uh, I didn't mention this to you before, but I know I told you I was a really nuts bolts kind of skeptic before that. But after my near death experience 11 years ago, I got really into like quantum physics and the whole consciousness aspects of it, and just all of that. It was a way for me to cope with my physical pain, and I feel now like the past decade, it primed me. I guess it helped me be more open to accepting the things that I'm experiencing now, and also, what you said earlier, I just didn't want to forget this about the orbs inside. I just started experiencing those very recently, like in the past couple of weeks. These little tiny gray orbs that are really small, and I've heard people talk about them before. And I don't know if one of them is more extraterrestrial, extra dimensional, like we were saying, or if one is maybe more spiritual. The reason I say it is I had a family member pass away not long ago, and it wasn't too long after that I started seeing this little tiny gray orb in my home, and it kind of freaked me out the first couple of times, just because I'm not used to having something in my house. I love seeing the ones outside, the glowing ones. But what you were saying about them seeing us as orbs, I never thought about it like that. That's really I got my mind going a lot of places.
Mhm.
Um,
So just let me comment on that, please.
okay.
You as a near-death experiencer have already raised your vibrational frequency to a certain extent, and you can see things. You can experience things differently than the normal human. That's academic studies have indicated that experiencers of ET contact and near-death experiencers are pretty much the same.
Do
So
you think? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
it could be the presence of your loved one who has just passed over, who's visiting again, or it could be an interdimensional or ET orb just containing the consciousness of that. When I asked the council to show themselves to me, I saw 3 little gray orbs just bobbing along my lawn, and they had kind of a bright amber center.
Oh,
Yes,
I've never
all
even
of
heard of the gray orbs. I'd never heard of the gray orbs until I started experiencing them a few weeks ago, and I looked them up and see other people are seeing them too. And did the one that you mentioned, did it have almost like a transparent, but kind of like a not fuzzy, but like a staticky kind of so I can't really explain it, but
yeah,
did it get
they're
on something like the
plasma.
surface?
They seem like plasma.
Yeah, yes.
Mhm.
Um, okay, and by the way, guys, I'm sorry I haven't been paying attention so much to the chat, but if y'all have any questions for Kathleen, make sure you put them here in capital letters, because I I'll probably be able to go for like maybe another 20 minutes. I'm gonna have to get off here a little bit earlier. I normally go around 2 hours for these, but I would say yeah, maybe about 20 minutes if that's okay with you. Um, I do have a few other questions. Are you familiar with these? Because you were talking about like this whole membrane between realities, and that's where I've been thinking with all this too, is that there's maybe even if they're on another planet, that they have an ability to pop in like a radio signal, I guess, and that's how they're able to just come into this frequency and this reality and materialize, I guess. Are you familiar with these like DMT studies that they've done with people experiencing the same entities and like blind experiments and like say one person will be on one side of the world and it might be like days later and these people have no contact with each other. They don't even know what the study's for, but they're not just like the things that a lot of people hear about, like these I've heard people talk about machine elves, sorry, but also like this lady I recently heard about with like a headset or a headdress that has these crystals on it and these other entities, but it's like identical experiences while these people are doing these DMT studies. Are you familiar with that at all? And what's your
Um,
thoughts on it?
I've not as much as you are apparently. I
Oh, I
should look
just
into
got
that.
into it.
I know I should. I've looked into. I thought you were going to talk about out-of-body experiences because I am very familiar with the out-of-body experiences that people have had, and in the ones I've looked into, there were entities that I wasn't familiar with, but they saw something, and then there are those who take ayahuasca, and so
Yes.
I'm aware that uh, that really solves a lot of people's problems because it changes people incredibly.
Yes.
And I know that DMT changes people too, that it's being used experimentally as a psychiatric process with patients.
Yes. Um, yes, I just thought, and the ayahuasca thing, that was a part of it. And I was going to ask you about the out of body thing as well. I just thought it was just fascinating that these people don't know each other and they're experiencing the same beings, and it made me feel like, or made me think, what if they're having this experience and they're going across that veil between realities, if that's what you want to call it. But as far as the out of body experiences, was there anything else that you wanted to add with that, or have you had any yourself that you'd like to share?
Oh, I had my first out of body experience when I was 13 years old, and I was in the school cafeteria, and I was a very responsible child, and had a lot of responsibilities in the school, sort of being rewarded for that. And one of them was to work at the lunchroom table with the younger children. And on that particular day, I'll never forget it. I ended up on the ceiling in this gymnasium, looking down at myself. So that was the first time. Later on, when I was having contact a lot, I developed certain abilities, such as the ability to channel healing to people. And during that time frame, I didn't know that two girls in my town had passed away, but I was out of body, and I met these two girls in the clouds and talked to them, and they were traveling with a band. They seemed happy. They seemed fine. And I didn't know until a few days later that they had actually died in a plane crash with this band,
Oh,
and
wow.
going over the mountain. And so I told the mother about it. It was a great relief to her after she
Wow.
heard about me having that out of
So that
body.
was like that was like a premonition, as well as you, I guess, meeting these girls' spirits after they'd crossed over. That's well, yeah, that's incredible, really. Um, as far as the consciousness thing, because I want to make sure that I get on that a little bit more, because I'm not going to have as much time as I was hoping for. It really feels like right now in the UFO community, I'm still, somewhat new into all this, but I can really see just from the time that I've been into it that it's becoming a lot more accepted that consciousness has a huge role in this. And I think it could be the connective thread between everything, whatever you want to call something paranormal or extraterrestrial or interdimensional. Consciousness is that one link between everything. And I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation if there wasn't consciousness, but what do you feel like right now, like we're getting close or closer, I guess, to a time where it's going to be a lot more accepted that these things are part of our reality? I mean, I think for a lot of people it obviously is, but what's your opinion on that? And do you think that's what they want, like, as far as like what you're talking about with the council earlier?
I think that we are moving very slowly in that direction, and it began with our government scientists, military people in high positions in the federal government telling us, letting us know about the tic tac, about the very strange craft, highly technologically advanced craft off both coastlines, and how they appeared over and over and over again, and they came up out of the water, and that they're not from this planet. The scientists say, are far beyond our second generation technology. And so, they're revealing this information to us a little bit at a time. The first revelation was on December 16, 2017. And they're feeding us a little bit, piece by piece. They just released the book Skinwalker at the Pentagon, and gave us more information about this overlap between the paranormal and the interdimensional aspects of it, the extraterrestrial aspects of it. I wish that they had been doing this all along, because they knew about this. They were observing the same thing way back in 1946, 1947. They were doing studies on this. They've done 3 major studies on these characteristics with chi-square analyses. They knew that these things were real, but they thought it best to cover it up because of the public just becoming hysterical about all of it. And so I think that this is a very slow process of enculturating us, all humans, to have a little piece of information, one piece at a time. And since I have been part of this for so many years, I have the information. I had it a long time ago, the information that they're talking to us about now.
Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine how much of a change this must be for somebody like you that's been in this for this long, and for it to be so taboo and looked down upon. And now it's, things are starting to become a lot more open, I guess, accepted. But like you said, it's a slow, like gradual, coming out in waves. And I agree with what you're saying. Like, maybe not everybody's able to handle this if it's all just thrown at them at once, and it has to come out little by little so everybody can learn about it, I guess, when the time is right for them. I guess, because I don't know, I just feel like maybe certain people wouldn't be able to handle that information overload. It might send them into a shock, like you said.
Yeah.
um I was going to say, as well as like with the paranormal things, maybe since they've known about this for a long time, whenever the whole UFO stuff started, I mean, like all the way back in the 40s, and 50s, um, they didn't know how to come out and say that it's not just alien, like what we were saying earlier. It's not just extraterrestrial. It's also a lot of other aspects to it. Like the things that are going on at Skinwalker. And I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking right now. Do you think that could be a part of why they covered up for so long? I'm sure there's a lot of other reasons as well, but
Yeah,
just that they
well,
couldn't say it's that one thing.
if you go back into the 30s, there was a Halloween Eve radio show. And in that show, there were like giant spiders who were uh, invading the world, and it caused public hysteria. It was awful for the people who were listening to it, who came in late and didn't hear the full story, to know that it was all fiction.
The War of the
And so
Worlds.
that was something that the Robertson panel, CIA-funded Robertson panel, took into consideration when it met in January of 1953. So if you go back to a year before that, in 1952, July of 1952, there were UFOs that showed up over Washington, D.C. Military jets were scrambled to chase them, to try to get them on radar. It was a big deal. And the cover story that was put out was that these were just spurious blips on the radar screen. But the real story behind that is, no, that's not what it was. These people who worked in the control towers were familiar with this. They had temperature inversions in Washington, D.C. almost every day that summer. They knew the difference. These were highly skilled and trained observers. And the military was very much involved in this. The CIA became involved in it as well. And then after this, in July of 1952, Major General John Sanford was his name, held the largest press conference at the Pentagon since the end of World War II. And at that press conference, he was answering questions about these craft seen over Washington. And statements that he made were very interesting, because he said these things are seen in the sky dating back to biblical times. Mm. That was a clue to me. And he also said they come back, they've been observed, they've been reported over the centuries. And he said, and now they're back again. We saw them in World War II as Foo Fighters. They were orbs in the sky.
Yes.
And yes, and he said it's nothing to really worry about. The Air Force is just examining this very carefully. And then, of course, then the Robertson panel met the following January, with the CIA funded, and made the decision that we're going to make all of this secret, top secret, and that the general population won't know about it. In fact, there's going to be a debunking effort made by scientists who are part of this scheme by the government. And these scientists are going to just use logical deduction in order to explain away all of this. I wrote about it in great detail in my book with Stanton Friedman, Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. You can find that on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble. There's also autographed copies on my website. So
Yeah, I'm going. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so the history is there, all of it.
I was going to say I'm going to be posting links to all your books on here, and I do have a little bit more time. I had somebody just had a family member just had a vehicle emergency. Their car has been messing up a lot, but they just said they got it under control, so I'm okay now for a minute. I was going to ask you, do you have any knowledge on the metamaterial being organic? Because I've spoken to a few people about that, and I've actually seen a picture of some of the metamaterial that was retrieved from Chris Bledsoe's house. That I think Lou Elizondo came and retrieved this, and I've heard from multiple people that this metamaterial, this metal, it some of it has like a DNA to it, like it's organic. I don't know exactly how to wrap my head around that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what I know about these metamaterials are that they're like fibers that are 1,000 times smaller than the human hair in diameter, that they are basket woven, that they are separated by almost like a beehive kind of core, and that there is layer after layer that makes it extraordinarily hard and safe for travel. And,
Wow, you said beehive. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you. You said beehive. I got excited there. What I saw, the picture of what I saw, it actually had this hexagonal pattern into it, and it was out of this world looking. No pun intended. Sorry, but yeah. Sorry. Were you going to say anything else with that? As far as what else you know?
I'm sorry. Many of the experiencers that I've worked with have stated that they have been taken to the central core of the craft and have been able to observe and sometimes communicate with the intelligence that's running these craft. So they seem to be biomechanical. This intelligence can run the craft. This craft mostly can jump through time and space. But it also knows everything, everyone on this craft, where all the other crafts are located. So there is definitely, I don't know if it's artificial intelligence, but it seems like intelligence, biological intelligence to people who have been there.
Do you think that people or the entities, their consciousness is somehow linked to the conscious of these craft?
Yes. Yes, the ET consciousness seems to be linked to it. And maybe human consciousness too, I'm not sure, because when people come close to craft as it hovers overhead, oftentimes they receive messages coming from the craft.
Yes. Yes. Wow. That is really fascinating. As far as I've got a few more minutes here. I guess I would say your time working with MUFON. What would you say? I don't know if you're allowed to say this really, but I was going to ask, what would you say is like the most compelling case that you dealt with, maybe that not so many people know of, if you're allowed to say, something like that?
Oh gosh, I've had a really incredible case, compelling case. It was investigated by MUFON, North Carolina. But I also investigated it independently and did the hypnosis with the people who were involved. And it actually happened on Chris Bledsoe's property. And Stanton Friedman introduced me to these two women who were highly respected paranormal researchers. And they wanted to conduct an experiment they would go to the home of a confirmed experiencer, set up their equipment, and attempt to collect EVPs, maybe video, whatever of craft. So I spoke to Chris about them and asked if they could go and visit his property. And he agreed to it. This was back in 2015. So they had all of their equipment set up, and they were standing outside at night with Chris, holding equipment in their hands. The video camera was in another part of the yard. And Chris said, I think that might be a craft coming in now up there next to the moon. And they're watching and they're asking questions and collecting EVPs. And all of a sudden, they're standing there weaving back and forth, and the equipment in their hands is no longer there. And they don't know what happened. They start to look around. It's now underneath a bush. And so they picked everything up. They went into the house, and Chris's wife was there and said, "Where have you been? I've been looking for you." And they didn't know they were missing, but they were. And along with Chris, I've interviewed him about this too. I'm still waiting to go up to his home, but it just has to work out. COVID was interfering for a long time. But what happened was, yes, they were all taken to craft. And the two women were, well, particularly one of them was traumatized at first. All she knew was the horror stories about being taken. And under hypnosis, this was a very pleasant experience. She had known them through all lifetimes, and they knew her personally, and they looked human. They looked a lot like us, just like the ones that Chris has interacted with as well. And then the other experiencer also had a very positive experience as well, but they were non-humans on the craft working with humans. And the women were able to actually capture a few seconds of video footage of these entities coming into our environment. And it is just amazing because you see an indigo, almost like a laser beam, but there are entities that drop off it, and they're not fully materialized at first. And then they grow larger and materialize as they go toward the ground. And there's one that rises up into the air, and he's sitting on some kind of a flying chair. And he has a blue light. That's the blue light that they can point at you, and you are taken to craft, and a white light. So he had one in each hand, and he's just turning his head and moving back and forth as he's looking in the yard, I'm sure, for Chris and the two women who are involved in this. It's an incredible story. You should actually have Pam on your show. Highly educated women, just incredible women.
What are their names? And I was going to say, while you were saying that, I've heard parts of that story before. I just didn't know that it was that specific story that you're telling, and you're telling me things I hadn't heard about it yet. But that's incredible.
Yeah, there's a lot of information regarding that case, and especially having captured these entities on camera, and I was able to do a frame by frame analysis of these entities coming in to the environment. So it was all good. It was all, highly spiritual and pleasant in the long run, even though they were frightened at first because they had that, that fear thing, because fear unfortunately sells. And, but it was all good.
That's incredible. What were their names again, by the way? You said Pam?
Yeah. Let me send you her information.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's so incredible because you said that they knew her whole life, and I know Chris, whenever he went through his regression, they told him that they were like his guardians, and
Yes.
that's why he looks at them like they're angelic. And you know, I'm sure you probably share the same belief that like what we view as something angelic is probably just some interdimensional being that's like closest to the source, like you mentioned earlier with uh it was one of the members of the council that you're talking about, just being like right under the source. And I was gonna say, you also mentioned earlier, sorry, that one of these entities, or one or more, that you said that they got to a point where they didn't have to reincarnate anymore, and that they
Yeah.
were just right under the source. Wow, that is so fascinating. Really, I'm definitely
Now,
going to have to look more into that.
I think of them in a sense as angels. And when I pass a Catholic church, I get a very strong tingling sensation in my crown chakra every time I pass a
Wow,
Catholic church. So I think that
wow,
I'm receiving help too from the angelic realm. Very positive.
that's incredible. I know I sent you the videos of the orbs I captured at Chris's. I don't remember if I mentioned, but he sensed those coming as well. It was like 10 minutes before, and I spoke with him for hours that day, and he told me how it has a lot to do with the frequencies. Like you said, not everybody can go over there and have an experience. He even told me how like one bad apple could spoil a bunch. How there's
Mhm.
been people going over there, and I guess if they have negative intentions, or if it's about self gain, or just something that's not a high frequency, that they might not see anything. But
Mhm.
about 10 minutes before, he told me, he looked at me, he said, "Josh, we're going to see something tonight. We're going to have an experience." He told me he felt that feeling like what you were speaking of, and I felt that feeling, but it wasn't until after they showed up, and I didn't know if it was just me, just the shock of actually seeing this and having witnesses with me, or if it was them giving me that feeling. But just like you said, it feels like a static feeling that goes through your body, and my eyes almost even watered up. To be honest, I don't mean to sound overly emotional, but for me, it was such a big thing because it's like it was confirmation, really, and it wasn't just the fact that I was seeing it. I'm seeing it with other people; they're seeing the same thing, and I was able to record it, and it's just I couldn't believe it was really happening. It's bizarre, and I didn't mention this to you, but there was a blue beam of light that came up out the ground just for
Mhm.
like maybe like a second or two. And I'm recording Chris's friend. He had let me use his device to record this stuff with. But as I'm recording it, right when the sun was going down, I see this blue beam of light coming up from the ground towards the sky, like behind the tree line. It's like it was just there and it wasn't there. And I didn't know if my eyes were playing tricks on me. And I turn around, and Chris and the other guy I can't name, they were recording some other orbs the opposite direction. And I asked Chris, I'm like, "Did you see that? It looked like a blue beam of light coming out the ground." And I'm still, just kind of just in, it feels like I'm dreaming. All this is happening so fast. But Chris just so casual. He goes, "No, I didn't see it, but me and my wife have seen it a couple of times." I'm just casual as can be. And I wanted to ask them before we get off, have you ever experienced anything like that, or do you know anything about these beams of light? Because that was totally new to me whenever I experienced it.
I can only tell you that I know these blue beams of light. I have not seen one coming up out of the ground, but one time when I was working at a conference and there was a group abduction at the conference, I I was dropped on my bed when I was delivered back to my room, and I opened my eyes, and there was this beautiful blue light. It was kind of rounded, and I could feel intelligence coming from it. I could feel energy. That's my conscious experience of the blue beam or whatever
Wow.
it is. Yes.
Yeah, that's incredible. Um, I'm going to go ahead and I need to go ahead and get ready to cut off here in a minute. I've had such a great time talking with you. I
Oh,
had
I've
some other
enjoyed it.
things that I really, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I had
My
some other
pleasure.
questions that I wanted to ask, but this time flew by really. And I know people in the chat, and there's other people who are going to watch this later. I know they've all enjoyed having you on here so much. Um, is there any, I'm going to post the links to your books and stuff. By the way, I need to update the description with your bio. Is there any upcoming shows or appearances or anything that you'd like to announce on here?
Yes, I have loads of upcoming shows. Um, but to promote this new book, um, they will be on social media generally.
Okay.
And then you can go to my website to see where I'm going to be speaking this year. I have several conferences coming up as well. Also, if you have Discovery Plus, there is a new documentary that was just released on Friday, and it's Shock Docs, Betty and Barney Hill, the first UFO contact or something like that. And I had a major role in that video.
Oh, really?
And so I would encourage you to watch it. I think it's the best done video of what happened to my aunt and uncle.
I'm going to be watching that tonight because I do have Discovery Plus. I'm glad you told me that. Thank you. And yeah, I will post a Nightmare. Thank you for helping me share some of her links. I'm going to be updating the description with your links for your social and where people can find your books and everything. And yeah, if you have Discovery Plus, what did you say that was called again? That show?
I know it's under Shock Docs. It's going to be on the Travel Channel eventually. I think it's Betty and Barney Hill, the first UFO contact or something like that.
Okay, I'm definitely going to be watching that tonight. Kathleen, I had such a good time with you on here. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yes, and I'd love to talk to you again sometime in the future. I know you're busy, you have a lot of things, but it's been such an honor, really. It's surreal to me that I got you on here. And Seb, I'm sure she's gonna be watching this in the future. I want to say thank you to her too for getting me in contact with you.
And I want to thank everyone who is listening, all of your supporters. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you as well.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this off and say bye to everybody. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, guys in the chat, and everybody that's watching this later. Thank you so much for listening to Kathleen and her incredible story. I'll see all y'all later. Bye, Kathleen.
Bye-bye.